Hello, and welcome to the Sustainable Solutions webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Science in Energy Policy and Climate Program, the Master of Science in Environmental Sciences and Policy Program, and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion on Amazon Plus 10, a Brazilian initiative for sustainable development of the Amazon. My name is Natalie Cross, and I am the event producer. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Sustainable Solutions playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Dr. David Guggenheim, Program Coordinator and Lecturer for the Master of Science in Energy Policy and Climate Program and the Master of Science in Environmental Sciences and Policy Program.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It is a real privilege for me to moderate this session. We have a great event tonight. As you heard from Natalie, this is part of a series called the Sustainable Solutions Speaker Series. And what I like about this program is that it features real practitioners and scholars working to tackle very daunting environmental issues, whether they're energy, climate, or any of the big problems that we face today. And it really features the...
It appears that Dr. Guggenheim's system has frozen up a little bit. Dr. Winkler-Prins, thank you so much and welcome. Why don't you go ahead and start your presentation?
All right, great. So I'll give a little bit of background because I think David was going to do that, explain who I am and all that. So I'll do that myself. But I'm really pleased to be here. Antoinette Winkler-Prins. I work for the National Science Foundation in Alexandria, Virginia, where I'm a deputy division director for behavioral and cognitive sciences. But I'm a geographer in my training and have been on faculty at Michigan State University and also here at AAP in the Environmental Sciences and Policy program, where I still periodically teach a class on sustainable food systems. But my research in the past has been on Amazonia, on soil knowledge, traditional soil knowledge, and economic change along the floodplain of the river. And that's quite a few years ago that I was doing that research. I also did some research on urban agriculture and networks of plant circulation in urban spaces. But very recently, I was able to spend some time in Brazil as an embassy science fellow. So this is a program that the Department of State has to encourage people at agencies such as mine, the National Science Foundation, to go and spend some time in another country based either at an embassy or at a consulate, and to be doing science diplomacy, to be fostering relationships between scientists in that country and the U.S. Obviously, because I spent time in Brazil. This was a wonderful opportunity for me to return to a country that I'm really love and I'm fascinated about. So, but in my case, I wasn't just at the consulate in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was actually embedded in FAPESP, which is an acronym for the Sao Paulo State Funding Agency. And so I work at the National Science Foundation, which is a federal funding agency, but I was embedded in a state funding agency because in Brazil, the Sao Paulo state has a lot of money available to support science, and the NSF in the US and FAPESP in Sao Paulo have a memorandum of understanding. And part of the goal of my embassy science fellowship was to further that, to further efforts and start programs and continue programs between our funding agencies. One of the other components of my Embassy Science Fellowship was to work with the leader of the Amazon Plus 10 initiative, Rafael Anderi, who is with us this evening and who will be presenting on that initiative after I'm done with my intro. Very exciting for me to see an initiative like this, because since I'd worked a few decades earlier on topics that are embedded in this new initiative, it was really exciting for me to see this come about. It is an effort between various states, different states within Brazil, as Rafael will explain to you. But what it highlights is that Amazonia is a contested environmental space in the world. It is critical importance for all sorts of ecosystems function, climate, etc. But it is also a space inhabited by people. And so the efforts that need to occur there need to both balance the needs of being able to sustain ecosystem services, as well as sustaining people who live there and need to derive livelihoods out of the forest. So Amazonia Plus 10 is looking at ways of fostering sustainability and development for people there while using the standing forests. So with all of that, I am going to turn it over to Rafael. I see David is back with us. David, I sort of gave myself my own little intro. Hope that's okay.
Covering for me.
No problem.
Just, the internet gods just chose that moment.
That moment, totally
to
understood.
Me out,
yeah.
And, I was so prepared. Just for the record, I had everything.
I know you were.
I did want to say one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
That in my work in the Caribbean, in places like Cuba and the Virgin Islands and elsewhere, I've really learned the lesson that conservation depends greatly on science and our breadth of knowledge. But in the end, it's really all about people. And if conservation is to succeed, you have to help people solve problems in their communities. And sometimes we forget that. We're so focused on the science, we forget, there's people there, and it's their behavior we may be trying to help guide along the way in a sustainable way that helps them. So that's something that your program, I think, embraces and exemplifies. So We've said my piece, and
yeah, and if you don't mind, I want to just add to that. I think we've also gotten to the point here in the 21st century where we're not as outsiders, as scientists coming in and telling people what to do. We need to be co-producing the scientific questions that need to be asked and the solutions. We need to be co-producing the solutions to the issues. And this is important in a space such as the Brazilian Amazon, because for far too long, people from outside the country would be trying to tell the Brazilians what to do with their forest, and this doesn't go over well. But there is a great potential of scientific collaboration, because Brazil has strength in various sciences, but there's great potential to collaborate scientifically on a number of issues of basic science that have to be investigated, and also on the solution side. So indeed, I think the Amazon Plus 10 program is a wonderful illustration of trying to do these things. Shall we hand it over to Rafael?
Unmute myself. I just want to, somebody may have been covering for me, but if you have questions, we will do questions and answers at the end. So if you have questions, please post them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. And with that, I turn it over to Rafael Anderi.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Antoinette, for your kind words and your very valuable insights in what we are doing, especially you, Antoinette, because you spent like a month here in Brazil. You were such a wonderful company, and you were of great help for us to try to improve what we do, try to think about new perspectives, and grow the initiative in some way. So you were an instrumental part on that for the last couple of months. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the Johns Hopkins staff to helping bring together this event and making it possible for us to broadcast a little bit about the Amazon Plus 10 initiative to a wider audience. English is not my native language, but I'll do my best over here. I have not such a short presentation per se, but I promise to go over it moderately quick so we can have some space for discussions perhaps after the presentation. So please let me know if you can see it now. Okay. Well, that's great. I think first and foremost, it is important for us to give a little bit of context about the Amazon. So as we are not only speaking about some ethereal concept, but do we really understand what the Brazilian Amazon, or the legal Amazon as we call in Brazil, means? So the legal Amazon in Brazil represents about 60% of the national territory and spreads across 9 states. I'm actually in São Paulo, so I'm pretty far away from the Amazon region. I'm as close to the Amazon rainforest as someone in Miami is actually. So you can get some perspective on the size of the Amazon and the size of the country. But the Amazon is also home to almost 30 million people, which is about 15% of the Brazilian population. So it's not a very densely populated area, but it is still home for a huge number of people who inhabit there. It is also home to approximately 120 billion tons of carbon dioxide. This is the equivalent of 10 years of global fossil fuel consumption. And only in 2024, more than 45,000 square kilometers of native Amazon forests were destroyed by fires. This is the highest rate of forest fire in the last 15 years. This amounts to about the size of Maryland and Connecticut put together, or 10 times the size of the Californian wildfires in 2024. So we're talking about a huge area. And we are only counting over here native Amazon forests. We are not even counting other biomes in the region that have been affected by those fires. So if you can put 2 and 2 together, you can see that the preservation of the Amazon is one of humanity's biggest and most complex problems. And of course, scientific community can put 2 and 2 together. So global scientific production on the Amazon has increased exponentially over the last 40 years. The problem with that, and I think Antoinette brought a little bit of it in her initial speech, is that this does not reflect in scientific production made from within the Amazon. I'm not even talking about within Brazil, but within the states that are part of the legal Amazon. So if you compare the legal Amazon region with the medians of Brazil in some important metrics, you can see that they have a much smaller rate of masters and PhDs per inhabitants than the rest of the country. Is less than half of the median for the rest of the country. The patent production in the region is almost non-existent. Out of the 9 states, 4 didn't even granted any patents during 2020. It has the lowest share of science and technology expenditures in the Brazilian regions at just 0.75% of state budgets. And its employment contracts in technical scientific occupations are as well below average when you compare it with the rest of Brazil. This adds to another problem that we had in recent years in Brazil, which was that federal spending in science and technology also suffered a huge decline from 2015 onwards up until last year. So this is particularly important for the Amazon region because its states are really, they really depend on federal expenditure, on federal budget. As you can see, the state of Roraima, for instance, 100% of science and technology expenditures were made by Brazilian federal government. So when you have a decline in Brazil in federal spending for science and technology, this affects with particular harshness the Amazon region when you compare to other states. Even Pará, which is one of the biggest states in the Amazon and which hosts one of the most important science and technology institutions that are based there, 77% of the expenditure in 2022 was made by the federal government. So we were dealing here with a multifaceted challenge, which was the conservation of the Amazon, of course, but also the low capability in financing and funding research that was made from within the Amazon. Facing this scenario, in 2022, FAPESP, which is the agency where I work and where I'm based in São Paulo, provoked its counterparts in the legal Amazon region to create a program to fund science and technology about the region, to sort of as a counter effort to counteract the decline in federal expenditures. So we told them we have resources available for investing in science and technology in the Amazon. We would like to know if you were interested in doing some subnational initiative to try to inject some resources in science production in the region. And this was very well met by the states from the legal Amazon. This is already an incredible feature because, as in America, Brazil is now a hugely polarized society. So we have governments from very different political spectrums, both inside the Amazon, but in São Paulo as well. And the initiative was met with great enthusiasm, independently of the political landscape in each particular state. So this was a first sign that the scientific community in those states were really engaged and could sense that the challenge that the Amazon was facing was of really urgent matter. So the one thing that our counterparts told us was that they would like the funding for science and technology within the Amazon to really impact people who live there. FAPESP was no strange to funding science about the Amazon. It was a huge partner. It had a huge partnership with NASA, NSF, and NOAA during the LBA, which was the Large Biosphere Atmosphere program during the 90s and the early 2000s. It had already invested about R$500 million in research about the Amazon for the past 20 years. But what our counterparts told us was that we were investing mostly in research made from above the canopy, above the forest canopy, which means we were investing in climate change physics, we were investing in satellite monitoring, and sort of this kind of projects. And they would like to have a program which could focus on below the forest canopy approach, which meant that the projects that we fund have to help the transition to a model of sustainable development for the Amazon. So we said, well, that's great. I mean, we are very much interested in having our projects in fund projects which have a huge impact on the ground. And we opened up this opportunity for other states as well to join. And today the initiative already aggregates 25 different state research support foundations from across Brazil. We have 25 states, actually 26 states and a federal district, and only 2 states are not a part of the initiative up until now. The federal government for the past couple of months or years, since 2023, also engaged in the initiative heavily. It is not a founding member because it is a subnational initiative, but it is a critical partner in all of the calls or in all of the spending that we do. And this below the canopy approach really reflects on the specific objectives of the initiative. So the first one is that we had to identify concrete research challenges in the legal Amazon, but we also had to mobilize local researchers and their external partners. We would have to engage local community in the initiative and give practical knowledge back to communities in the region. So every project that we fund has to be at least one researcher or scientific institution that it is based in the legal Amazon as a proposer, as a leader in said project. So we cannot fund only projects which have São Paulo researchers, or when we open up for external partners who have only partners from, say, the UK or Germany or the US. Every project that we fund has to have at least one leader that is based on the legal Amazon. And for every kind of external funding that we have, being it from NGOs or private companies or even the federal government, these resources have to be spent in the region, never in one of the states that are located outside the legal Amazon or in other countries or such. We divided ourselves in 6 different lines of actions. I will go through them briefly over here. The first one is challenges for the Amazon. We have calls for projects. We have a scientific expeditions line of action, and infrastructure modernization and technical training in science, technology, and innovation, mobility programs, and scientific communication and dissemination. Up until now, from 2022 to 2024, we already have 33 funding partners. We have mobilized about 143 million reais and already funded 69 projects altogether. The first call for projects we launched in the middle of 2022. This was really an urgent matter because we were not really sure how this initiative would work out. Brazilian funding agencies never had participated in such an ambitious multilateral initiative. Normally, we would fund bilateral or trilateral projects. And at this time, we had 19 different states funding projects over here. So our objective was to quickly inject some resources for researchers and institutions that are based in the region, to form networks between Amazonian researchers and their counterparts from across Brazil, and to identify the already existing networks that were operating, being formally or informally. So we financed 39 projects. Those projects will run up until the end of 2025 in a total financing amount of about 42 million reais. 1 year later, in 2023, we launched the scientific expeditions call by the end of 2023, actually in November, I think, which was aimed to fund research expeditions that document social biodiversity and its links with society in the Brazilian Amazon. Our main goal here was to overcome 2 kinds of biases that we found in basic research about the Amazon, which are the spatial biases. This means that most of the research that is done within the Amazon is normally done around big urban centers or around the scientific institutions that are based over there, or across the riverbeds, because riverways are a big part of Amazonic logistic transportation over there. So we would like to fund expeditions that could access further regions, could go deeper into the forest, and to expand our knowledge about parts of the Amazon that are underrepresented in scientific studies. And the other biases were taxonomical biases. So we have a huge amount of knowledge in certain species and birds, butterflies, or mammals, but we know very little about bacteria or fungi which inhabits the forest. So we were given preference to projects that could overcome these 2 kinds of biases. And as we were dealing with access to territories and many times to traditional territories, to indigenous territories, or quilombolas, or from traditional communities over there. Every project that we fund had to have at least one indigenous quilombola or traditional community representative listed as a researcher, not only as someone who would help those teams to move on the ground, but he would have to play a particular part during the research, which was made there. This was made obligatory. This was the first time that we had such an predicament in a call, and it was well received. We were able to fund only projects that brought this kind of perspective. So we had 24 funding agencies in this particular call. It was closed. We announced the results about a month ago, actually, in a total financing amount of about 95 million reais. This was the first time as well that we brought international partners to play a part within the initiative. Mainly because in our first call, we weren't quite sure that this thing would actually work out, that we were going to be able to work together and to produce some results. But after the first call, it was called that we were gaining some traction, we were learning with the difficulties, so we opened up for international partners as well. So we had the UK heavily invested in it with the British Council and the UK Research and Innovation, the UKRI, but also the Swiss National Foundation and the BILAT, which is a regional agency from Germany, from the Baviera region. But I think our most ambitious program is one that we are planning to launch by mid-2025, which is called the Challenges for the Amazon. This is a new program of the Amazon Plus 10 initiative with a mission-oriented innovation approach. So the objective here is to address concrete challenges in production chains of the bioeconomy in the Brazilian Amazon, supporting multidisciplinary projects from research and innovation consortia formed by companies, research and innovation institutions of the legal Amazon, and local communities. So the idea here is to bring the expertise from these different kind of actors to bring joint and long-term social environmental research and developments, to promote innovation in sustainable arrangements such as regenerative agricultural and extractive practices, and also to bring a component of fair economy and corporate social environmental responsibility. So the biggest challenge up until now was to identify what these challenges might be. Those are not very well organized value chains. We have a very different myriad of actors or stakeholders who play their parts over there. So we had to delve deep within those value chains and to talk to people who work on these value chains, people who study those value chains, and also people who benefit from those value chains. So we had a huge help from IADB, the Inter-American Development Bank, on this. They were able to hire a team of consultants to work immersively in this project. Those are 3 consultants that are based in Pará and Amazonas, and we are now opening up for 9 other consultants. Each one of them will be based in a different state from the Amazon. So some of the examples of challenges that we have identified so far are challenges for the acai supply chain and the food plain ecosystem, challenges in small-scale forest restoration, focusing on family farmers and traditional peoples and communities, challenges in the babaçu supply chain, challenges in cocoa production and agroecological transition for family farming, challenges in artisanal fishing and mangrove conservation, and challenges in community-based timber management in protected areas. All of these value chains and the challenges that we pose have to be compatible with a standing forest, with a living forest. So for each one of these challenges, we had to, I'm very sorry, I think I skipped some over here. we have to delve deeper on them. So, for instance, in a challenge to support the native acai management chain in floodplain areas in the states of Pará and Amapá, then we identified the need to map native tree species necessary for pollination. So, which kind of actor, which kind of stakeholder could bring a solution for this particular challenge? This would be more focused on researchers and STIs, so the type of support that we are going to offer for this solution are granting for scholarships and research aids. But we also need to develop systems to evaluate management practice in large areas. So this would be more about companies or startups. So economic subsidy would be the type of support that is more appropriate for overcoming this particular challenge, or certifications and other economic strategies to encourage the adoption of good labor practices. We would need this as well to support this particular value chain. So this would be more targeted for rural producers and traditional communities. So the type of support that we would be offering would be technical training, rural extension, and technical assistance. We have a series of partners helping us to identify, helping us to fund. I've already talked about the IDB and their help on this particular matter. And we are very well advanced to receive some funding from the Amazon Fund. The Amazon Fund is operated by the National Development Bank in Brazil. It is the biggest fund regarding the preservation of the Amazon within the country. It has focused for most of its history in fighting deforestation, in more command and control initiatives, but they would like to have more investment in science, technology, and innovation. So we are hoping to team up with them. We are on advanced talks about this, and we hope to bring together a very large scale project within the challenges of the Amazon for next year. Other line of action that we have is the mobility program. So here we are talking about mobility as an engagement tool and a strategy for the effectiveness and efficiency of the Amazon science, technology, and innovation system. So we talk about short-term exchange programs for high school, undergraduate, and graduate students, but also some more long-term exchange programs, which involve institutional training of research units in the Amazon. We've had some experience within this particular line of action in promoting workshops for scientific engagements. We've already conducted one round with the United Kingdom. We have an open call with France right now regarding those workshops for scientific engagement. And we are probably going to be opening one more call for this on March next year with China. So the objective here is actually to support cooperation in strategic thematics involving the Amazon between partner organizations and countries. The format are scientific events that reunite up to 40 scientists from the Amazon and its partners, focusing on training of young researchers and development of pre-proposals for further funding opportunities. This is very important because many times, especially researchers that are based within the Amazon do not have practice or do not have many contacts abroad Brazil. They have a lot of contacts within Brazil, of course, but sometimes they lack contacts abroad. And this is true, of course, for researchers from say, the US or UK that study the Amazon and many times do not have a connection that actually lives there or works there. So this is a very interesting, very cheap and a very practical strategy to bring those people together for them to actually get to know and get to start working together, so we can afterwards prepare some more large-scale funding for those projects. This has worked wonderfully well with the UK. We could see this in the scientific expeditions call because the UK was actually one of the biggest proposers of projects within the initiative. I think they were only like behind Pará, Amazonas, and São Paulo. If they were a state, they would be the fourth with most interest in the projects. But mainly because we had those experiences that were funded by the British Council that could bring those researchers from the UK next to researchers from the legal Amazon. So when we launched the call, they were already in contact. They were already pretty much prepared to work together and to present some kind of proposal. This is the one that we have with the Embassy of France in Brazil. Those are trilateral workshops actually, because they also involve French Guiana. So this call was open, I think, last week on the 21st. We are going to French Guiana next week to promote it to the researchers from the University of Guyana as well. And we are very, very much excited about it. We also have a line of action about infrastructure modernization and technical training in science, technology, and innovation. The idea here is basically to fund infrastructure, of course, and technical training. But the idea with the objective to leverage Amazonian institutions to position them as reference centers in biotechnology. So we are working with federal agency as well on this. We are still in initial talks actually, so we do not hope to launch anything specific on this matter next year, perhaps on 2026 or 2025. But the kind of equipment that we are hoping to fund is research laboratories in natural active principles, libraries of natural compounds extracted from biodiversity, data centers for biotechnology development, and virtual and physical repositories of Amazonian social biodiversity. This is a bottleneck for Amazonian institutions. Infrastructure is a huge problem over there within universities or research institutes. So it is a big demand from the scientific community that we are hoping that we can address more directly and more thoroughly in the future. We have some other partnerships over here. I don't think I have to extend myself very much on this, but just some quick numbers on the balance and future of the initiative. As I said, up until now, we had 33 funding partners and mobilized about 143 million reais. This is the kind of resources distribution that we see in the initiative so far. So as you can see, FAPESP has represented about 20% of the resources that were mobilized up until now. Other state agencies represented 28.7%. CNPq is the federal government over here, is the biggest federal agency that supports science and technology. So they represent 23% of resource distribution, and international funders already represent about 30% of the resources mobilized. For the next 4 years, up until 27, we have an availability of about 207 million reais. Here we are talking only about resources that are going to be made available by state agencies. We are not talking about federal government. If the Amazon Fund comes through with our challenges of the Amazon project, this number will certainly be much, much higher. So I think this is an overview about what the initiative has been conducting so far. Over here, you can see my contact information. I will just stop sharing right now. And I think that one opportunity that we have here, David and Antoinette, was to actually engage as well with American institutions, American universities, or American institutes, so we can think of ways in which we can cooperate and bring the amazing American scientific community to work together and alongside Amazonian researchers. I think this is the main message that we have here, is to of course conserve the Amazon. The Amazon is the biggest challenge, but how can we do this involving the people who actually lives there and works there and already has all of this knowledge about how the region actually works. So I think that was it. I hope I've not extended myself too much.
No, it's perfect, Rafael. Thank you so much. It's so interesting. And I think you've also communicated in addition to the successes, the real challenges to putting a program like this together. So I encourage folks, we have a couple questions in the chat. We do have a little bit of time here, so let's take full advantage of Rafael and Antoinette here. And I'm going to do that myself right now. One of the privileges of moderating is I can ask the first question. And I'm asking it in the sort of in the context that here in the United States, we have a very important election coming up in less than a week. And unfortunately, environment is one of those things that in this country has been quite polarized. And I was intrigued to hear you talking about the political divide in Brazil, which I assume has had a significant impact on the Amazon, particularly more recently. That would, again, presuming it would prioritize economic development over conservation, reducing regulations, which would result in more development, mining, logging, and all of those things. And I wonder if you could just, expand a little bit on that, because I always thought that in general, that the environmental divide was sort of uniquely American. I think maybe for different reasons, it's taken hold in Brazil, but it would be really interesting to hear you talk about that.
It's definitely not an American feature. I mean, it played a huge deal in the birth of the Amazon Plus 10 initiative, because on later years we had an administration that was pretty much aligned with what you just mentioned, that economic development above all, and they would favor regulations, they would incentivize logging, they would incentivize cattle ranching within the Amazon, and with a very dismissive actually attitudes towards NGOs or people who would act as protectors of the forest. So we were living really in a time where this was absent from federal government procedures, being there in science and technology or environment ministry or any other agencies or regulatory agencies. So it played a huge deal. The main motive for us to propose this was the lack of interest from the federal government via this particular problem. So as we were not having any response from the federal government, and this can also be expanded, and this I think you don't have in the US, was a total disregard for the federal budget for science and technology as well. It was not seen as something important or as a priority for the administration. So this was what brought the need for us to create something like that in a subnational level, because otherwise it wouldn't be like something in which São Paulo, for instance, would get involved with. We are not near the Amazon. Of course, we could get involved with, but we would never lead something like this. This would probably come from the federal government, as it has forever in Brazil. But so this is really a particularity on the Amazon Plus 10 initiative. It acted in a vacuum, in a void of action from the federal government. This is not a situation that we have now, but it was what motivated us to propose this for the Amazon states. Even just to add something, even in some of these states, those local governments, they are pretty much aligned with, let's say, well, to put it very clearly, the extreme right in Brazil. Those are very right-wing governments who see the Amazon as a place which has to be developed and you have to plant soy, and you have to. But then again, I think the scientific community in those states played a huge role in it as well to help us to get through this and help them to engage in it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, a lot of this has actually made global news. We've seen news about these political changes here in the U.S., and it's very interesting, but very disconcerting as well. Lots at stake in your political situation and ours. So here's hoping for the best. There's a question from Chris. Are you getting any assistance from IBAMA with the tree species identification and mapping efforts? And IBAMA is the Brazilian Institute of Environment and Renewable Natural Resources, a federal agency under the Ministry of Environment.
IBAMA, Chris, thank you for your question. IBAMA is an important partner, especially within the scientific expeditions call. They were helping us a lot with understanding the regulations in which those projects had to occur, the kind of certification that foreign scientists or the scientific community had to have to access those territories. But they are not properly a scientific institution. They act more in a command and control kind of way. Of course, they know a lot. They have a deep knowledge about the Amazonian biome. They have been there. They have very advanced bases over there, deep within the forest. So they play a huge part in helping us with logistics and regulations, but not particularly with scientific effort. So when you talk about mapping of trees or tree species identification, most of this work is actually done by universities or by scientific institutes, or even by the Forestry Service in Brazil, which is a different agency which helped us a lot. But normally they propose to those calls. They are researchers that apply for those calls to be funded, so they are not within the funding effort of it. They help us with regulations, they help us with logistics, and they have a good communication with us, so we can connect them to researchers that we fund, but they do not help us with the research efforts.
Thank you. A question from Penny, who I'm happy to say is one of my current students. This initiative incorporated an impressive and commendable framework for indigenous knowledge and research. What kind of challenges, if any, did you encounter in translating study designs, communication approaches, etc., and how did you overcome any barriers that may have existed?
Well, thank you, Penny, for supposing that we have overcome any of those barriers, because there is a huge concern in Brazil nowadays and in the scientific community on how we can translate this kind of knowledge, and how we can. It's not actually about translation. It's about incorporating but yeah, translation. I can work with that. So what we have been doing right now actually is part of another initiative which will focus specifically on this. We have been talking with the Ministry of Indigenous People, and they are very keen to help us fund something that works with translating study designs. We are not sure how we can do this. One of the problems that we have to overcome, and this is a very practical problem actually, is that funding agencies in Brazil, and I guess that in most of the world, they do not have grants that are designed specifically for people who do not hold more traditional academic background. So we cannot fund people who hold traditional knowledge in the way we can fund someone who is doing a master's or a PhD. So this brings a whole level of imbalance within the projects that we fund. because you are paying someone who is doing the same work in a different way, just because they do not hold a traditional knowledge background. So to truly overcome this kind of challenges, we would have to think about legislative initiatives. There are people talking about this in Brazil. The Ministry of Indigenous People is concerned about this, but we do not hold the tools to overcome all of those barriers. What we can do for now, and what we have been doing with some degree of success, was to make at least the scientific community see that it is important to co-create, it is important to integrate these kind of knowledges, it is important to bring those people to the table and bring those people to work together with you during your research projects. When we launched the Scientific Expeditions Call, this was met by some researchers, and some of them very well-established researchers, very respected researchers who have conducted amazing research regarding the Amazon. But this was met with some kind of skepticism. They would say, how am I going to find someone from a traditional community to work within it? I do not know yet who this person is going to be. And we said, well, you are going to have to work on this. And you are going to have to tell us what these people, what role these people will have in your particular project. And you are going to have to tell us how you plan to access this kind of territory. So I think we are now working more of a phase of informing the scientific, of course, informing the scientific community about the importance of this perspective. But I think that there is so much more to be done, and we are very, very keen on conducting some specific call on this kind of translation of knowledges.
We have about 8 minutes left. I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 final questions for you. This is from Natalia, also one of my current students. Hi, Natalia. And hi, Penny. A couple of days ago, the New York Times published an article revealing that a new threat to the Amazon is purposefully killing forests through toxic and poisonous chemicals to get around logging regulations. She's curious to hear your perspective on this issue, the scale you're aware of, and any efforts by Amazon Plus 10 going towards that.
This was a very mediatic case in Brazil. The farmer who did this, they call it chemical deforestation. He actually used some compounds from Agent Orange, which was used in the Vietnam War. Yeah, but I think this happened in Pantanal. It was not in the Amazon. But I think in this particular case, I would hate to be someone who say, "Oh, this is a one of a kind event." But this is the only case that we've heard of something so extreme so far. He did commit this crime. He was, I think he got arrested for it, but I don't think it is a structural problem or a problem with a magnitude that would impact the legal Amazon. It is an expensive compound. You would have to have planes to overflow forests and such. The biggest problem over in the Amazon right now, because what farmers or land trespassers do to circumvent the logging and the deforesting is actually to use fire. So forest fires, about 99 or 98% of them are man-made in the Amazon, because it is a very humid place. Albeit we have been going through a very severe drought, and this happens for this fire to expand. This fire is normally initiated by man. So the biggest problem today in the Amazon, I would say, it is the forest fires and how they are used by cattle ranchers or by land trespassers to help to clean the native forests.
Great. And our last question comes from Romina, who says, congratulations on a very well-designed initiative. Is there any research or focus on the use of medicinal plants and traditional knowledge regarding the pharmaceutical industry? And what measures are there to protect the genetic material and indigenous knowledge? And she further asked about progress toward sustainable pharma.
This is a hugely controversial subject, especially for indigenous people. We have seen even some legal actions that were taken by some indigenous people who live in Acre against some pharma companies in Canada who they were synthesizing. Is that right? Synthesizing.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca. So they are taking legal actions because ayahuasca is something which is connected to traditional knowledge, and it is connected to a ritual or a religious use, and it was being done to treat depression. So this is a hugely controversial issue. The main measures that we have to protect genetic material and indigenous knowledge nowadays is the Nagoya Protocol, which has to be followed by companies, but we as funding agencies, we have no control or the capacity to control something like this. So we have not acted on a particular program to pharmaceutical industry using traditional knowledge up until now. This would have to be done with extreme care, with the participation from health ministry, with probably some high levels of federal government. We are not mature enough to deal with something like that. And we also do not have the scale big enough to deal with pharmaceutical research. So this is not in our landscape for now.
There are a couple other questions in the chat, and unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we'll try to take those offline. And if you can just you could email me. I'll give you my email address. Okay. Yeah, all the questions came in all at once at the end, but we'll try to get back to you. I really want to thank you. Antoinette Winkler-Prins and Rafael Enderi. I really appreciate you both being here. It was very enlightening. I always talk to my students about the problems today really require an interdisciplinary approach, and I think your project really embodies that as well. If you have any final comments, and then we'll turn it back to Natalie. So, Rafael, or Antoinette, anything else you want to add?
I think I would just like to thank you, David. Thank you for the audience for taking the interest, taking the time, and having interest in this subject. I know that it awakens a lot of curiosity. So I'll be happy also to answer any questions you may have. You may contact me directly on my email that I showed over there. I can write this on the chat message. If you have no problem with this, and sometimes I take a little time to answer it, but I promise I'll get there. So yeah, just that. Thank you, David, and thank you, Antoinette, and congratulations for this amazing program that you conduct over here.
Thank you. Thank you again, Rafael. Antoinette?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for all the interest. Great questions from everyone. And I, Rafael, I'm sure will help answer. I'm also happy to help with any of it. The Amazon is a very complex place, and I really appreciated the careful questions and the appreciation of that complexity. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Please stay tuned for our future programs. We have them coming up soon, and I was going to promote the next one, but you should, if you got notified about this one, you should get notified about the next one. And anyway, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back to Natalie Cross.
Yes, and I'd like to extend my thanks to Raphael Anderi and Antoinette Winkleprins, and also Dr. David Guggenheim, and for everyone who has attended this session. Our next session for the Sustainable Solutions webinar will be the Predicting Emissions Reductions Using Poison Statistics, which is on November 14th at 6 p.m. I've put the link in the chat, and I'm also sharing the graphic for it.
I want to just give a warm good night to everybody, and thank you again to all of you for being here. See you soon.